Greetings friends, this is Sanjay with part 4 of my introduction and backdrop to the Bhagavad Gita. This is the second section detailing the main characters of the epic Mahabharata. Thank you for joining me again. Please do like, share and subscribe to my channel. In part 3, see links in the description for earlier videos, we saw the story begin with Shantanu and his 10 children. Out of the 10, only 2 remained. Bhishma, who had renounced his right to the throne to enable Shantanu to marry his second love Satyavati, and her remaining son Vichitravir, who ruled with the support and guidance of his elder half-brother. It seemed like a winning ticket, but all was not well in paradise. Satyavati grew anxious for grandchildren for the sake of the Hastinapur throne. Bhishma's dedication to this throne forced him to find a solution to ensure the continuity of the Kuru lineage. Bhishma, not one to do things by half, rode out to the neighboring kingdom of Kashi and kidnapped 3 princess sisters. There was no question of anyone opposing the mighty Bhishma, and there was no thought of right or wrong in his mind. This was all overshadowed by his commitment to serve the Hastinapur throne, which needed an heir, full stop. Ambika, Ambalika and Amba were to be the brides of Vichitravir. This abduction was on one hand to facilitate the continuation of the Kuru lineage, yet it planted the seed of Bhishma's demise. Out of the 3 sisters, Amba's heart was elsewhere. She loved the prince of Salva, and she begged Bhishma to let her go. Bhishma agreed. However, Shalva rejected her. Under Kshatriya code of conduct, he could not live with the guilt of accepting a woman he had lost in battle. She returned back, only to be rejected by Vichitravir, because she loved another. Amba turned to Bhishma and asked him to marry her. Bhishma's vow of celibacy was firm, and he refused. The seed of revenge was thus planted. Amba declared that she would never forgive Gangaputra Bhishma for humiliating her. She would be the cause of his death. In her next life, Amba was reborn as Shikindi, arguably the only transgender person on the Kurukshetra battlefield. For her full story, see the link attached. In his play The Morning Bride, William Congreve wrote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Amba was so scorned that she, as Shikindi, was the direct cause of Bhishma's death. Perhaps this was the beginning of #MeToo. Moral dilemmas run throughout the Mahabharata. Why did Bhishma feel it okay to abduct the 3 sisters? His attention was solely for the protection and maintenance of the Hastinapur throne. That was his vow. But by so doing, he considered the 3 women as chattels. Was that right? Back to the Kuru lineage. With his elder brother dead, Vichitravir was placed on the throne. All seemed well, with Bhishma guiding the ruling of the kingdom. However, securing succession was on everybody's mind. Amba, rejected, was out of the picture, leaving Ambalika and Ambica to add to the Hastinapur royal lineage. But, as Robert Burns lamented in 1785, the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. Vichitravir died without producing the all-important heir. Now what? Plan B. For Plan B, we go back a few generations to the lineage of sage Vashist, the very same who had cursed the Vasus to be born, but softened the penance for 7 of them. The 8th, Bhishma, had to complete the full term of his sentence. We come to sage Parasha, grandson of Vashist. Parasha enabled the Kuru dynasty to continue, albeit in a roundabout way. groundwork for Plan B had been set long before Satyavati and Shantanu even met. Mythologically, Satyavati was the daughter of an Apsara or celestial nymph. She was adopted by a fisherman chieftain and was brought up on the banks of the river Yamuna, where she ferried people across the river. This is where she caught the eye of the wandering rishi Parashara. Satyavati was a gorgeous woman, but was cursed to smell like fish. People were repelled by her. Parashara granted her a boon to have a musky fragrance. An illicit liaison occurred, and Vyas was the result. Vyas, the very same Ved Vyas, compiler of the Vedas and the genius who gave us the epic Mahabharata. Plan B was to invoke Niyog. This was an ancient tradition in which a woman whose husband was either incapable of fatherhood or had died without offspring could request and appoint a revered man to help her bear a child. Enter center stage Vyas. In desperation for a successor, Satyavati asked her other son to step up and become a surrogate father. A stepbrother, albeit illegitimate, Vyas filled in for Vichitraved, who died without an heir. Vichitraved represents the causal body of man, the individual soul, the seed of our physical existence. This is obscured due to its association with outward manifestations of consciousness, namely Ambica, representing negative doubt, perception without clear understanding, and Ambalika, signifying positive discrimination. Vyas symbolically is pure discriminating intellect, which is in the background but connects with the outward forms of consciousness. So Vyas, obedient to his mother, steps up to perform. However, Mr. Vyas was not exactly Mr. Universe, at least not in terms of his appearance. On seeing him, the two would-be mothers became terrified. Ambika was first. She was so frightened she closed her eyes the whole time. Vyas reported back to his mother that as a consequence the child would be born blind. Ambika thus mothered the blind king Dhritarashtra. Second try, this time with Ambalika, who kept her eyes open but became pale in fear. Vyas reported back that this time the child would be frail and weak. As such, Ambalika mothered Pandu, a sickly child. Dhritarashtra was the firstborn from the Niyog of Ambika and Vyas. He, blind from birth, represents our mind. The pure discriminating intellect, Vyas, is overshadowed by negative doubt, Ambika, resulting in a mind which lacks the power to differentiate as to which course of action to follow. It follows the senses blindly. Hence, our sense mind is said to be blind. Dhritarashtra is derived from dhrata, to hold on to, and rashtra, meaning kingdom. So he holds on to the kingdom, which is what he tried to do at the cost of everything, just as the mind holds on to its desires. The second union was of Vyas with Ambalika. This was the union of pure discriminating intellect with the faculty of positive discrimination, from which arose Pandu. He represents the power of wisdom and discrimination, which is our buddhi or intellect. The word Pandu in Sanskrit means white, traditionally representing purity. Vyas reported back to Satyavati that one of her grandchildren would be blind and the other would be sickly, neither ideal for the future king of Hastinapur. The queen then asked Vyas to go for third time lucky. Vyas went back to Ambika, who, still in terror, substituted her maid servant for herself. The maid was neither scared nor closed her eyes. From the union arose Vidur. Vidur became the most trusted advisor to the Hastinapur throne and arguably the most suitable to be the king. But alas, his DNA was not appropriate. The seed for the dispute in the family took root with the two half-brothers and manifested in the next generation. Dhritarashtra, blind from birth, was considered not suitable to be king. The blind mind cannot be left in charge, otherwise it will not control the senses. Resentment began from this. Was Dhritarashtra wrong? As per tradition, the eldest son inherited his father's position. However, he was denied this and Pandu was placed on the throne. The wheel of life has to continue. Dhritarashtra was married to Gandhari, a princess from the kingdom of Gandhar, the land of fragrance, modern-day Kandahar in Afghanistan. Bhishma had taken the proposal for Dhritarashtra to marry the princess of Gandhar. Refusing such a mighty warrior would have been considered an insult. However, Gandhari's brother, Shakuni, was livid over the proposal for his beautiful sister, and he vowed revenge. It was his scheming and deceit which took the Kuru family to war. Gandhari, on the other hand, took the liaison to heart. She declared that as her husband was blind, she would wear a blindfold for the rest of her life. Gandhari represents the power of desires. Its union with the non-discriminating mind leads to uncontrolled desire, which is the long-standing enemy of man. Gandhari's pregnancy was said to have lasted 2 years. In frustration, she pounded her stomach and delivered only a hard mass of flesh. With the assistance of Vyas, the mass was brought to life, giving rise to 100 sons and 1 daughter. The eldest son was Duryodhana, who stands center stage in the great Mahabharata battle. Together with his siblings, they represent the sensory tendencies towards material enjoyment. Because of Gandhari's difficult pregnancy, Dhritarashtra also sired a son by his second wife, Vaishya. Vaishya represents the attachment to desires. Their son was Yuyutsu, the only Kaurav to side with their archenemy, the Pandavas. Yuyutsu is said to be the desire to psychologically withstand the force of material desire. Thus, there is a ray of hope in the midst of so many negatives as represented by the Kauravas. Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, represents material desire which sits in us all. Du is difficult, Yodna is fight, so Duryodhana is someone who is extremely difficult to fight. Such is the nature of material desire once it has been established in us. Material desire has power over all senses of the body, very difficult to fight, and it obstructs man's journey to self-realization. Duryodhana is the leader of all his demonic brothers. He is a character who lives his life in contradiction to Dharma. Dharma is a key concept of religions from the Indian subcontinent. Although there is no direct translation into English, it depicts the virtuous idea of one's duty, laws to follow, and the correct way of living best suited for the evolution of man and the harmonious functioning of society. Duryodhana lived in complete antithesis of this, motivated by greed, jealousy and revenge. We will see how he cheated his cousins and brought about the epic Mahabharata war. So that was the lineage of the Kauravas, who stood on one side of the battlefield, led by the mighty Duryodhana. Material desire leads all pleasure sensations. It is a formidable force to overcome on one's journey to the self. So, we'll pause here. In the next episode, we'll meet the remaining characters of this family tree who will stand in opposition to Duryodhana. I appreciate the time you have spent in following this series and the support you have given. Thank you. Please do continue to like, share and subscribe to my channel and be notified of future videos. Any comments you may have would be most welcome. Thanks and see you soon.